Thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. This is a scene that I've been thinking about for a while since I designed this Curvy Walk Way design, and this is the first time I've gotten around to using it, but I kind of imagined it kind of going through kind of a rainforesty type of composition, and tried it out in this format right here, and had some fun with it. Enjoyed working with some different types of brown tones and giving it this kind of aged texture, you know, maybe with the different media, different types of inks, you know, using both the dye-based and the alcohol inks in various values and hues, and just surrounded it with some other types of imagery like the I don't know, the mossy tree trunks here, a couple different sizes, and I don't know, for a quarter-page scene I worked quite a few different images into this composition, but the leafless pines here, and a couple different of the newer leaf stamps, a little bit of texturing with the tiny rocks right here, but anyways, kind of a little bit of a passageway. The curvy walkway really makes for a kind of a natural lead-in into scenes and any type of composition you're working in. This one's kind of like just going into the distance here, but you can certainly have this leading up to something, anything that you want your viewer's eye to look at. If you have kind of a lead-in style of image, you know, your eye will just naturally follow that pathway right up to whatever it's leading to. So I guess in this area it's kind of the, I don't know, whatever, the great unknown, or kind of an open space. So a little bit of a kind of a darkened area around here, so I brought that out with a little bit of kind of the firefly type of little critters in there, just to kind of illuminate that area and to bring it to life a little bit. In this video, or in this area right here, it's getting a little bit of glare, but you can see the variation in you know, value differences right in here. If I kind of hold this up a little bit more, the foreground areas, objects were stamped out with the Versafine, so they really stand out and kind of are almost dimensional in appearance. So I don't know, just a fun little scene. If you choose to watch the video, I hope you enjoy it, and thanks as always for tuning into the channel. Okay, let's see what we can do with this walkway here. It'll be my first time ever using this stamp. It's one of those that I look forward to using all of my new designs, but this one is one of those that I've really spent a lot of time on, just getting the textures and everything down right. Just like, what does an old piece of wood look like, you know, when a nail has been, you know, stuck in it for 10 years, dozen years, whatever, 20 years, whatever. And getting those splits in the grain of the wood were really important to me, and how to finish off the edges too, you know, just how much edge should I have showing and how much shadow should I put next to it, just to make it as universally applicable as possible for what it, you know, whatever people might be using this design for or in. Okay, now this one right here, just I put the bottom end of it at the base of the paper, otherwise it'll be just kind of going to be cut off. Although you could do something like, you know, if like the paneling, you know, starts, you know, some distance, you know, and there's ground here, and this is like an over water walkway or something like that, you can do that a little bit higher up, but I'm just going to put this one right at the base of the paper right here, kind of as a visual lead-in into the scene. Okay, now on this one right here, one of the my reference piece that I was looking at when I was drawing this was it was like a resort somewhere in the Caribbean, I think it was, or something like that, tropical. And this was just in their landscape, and they had it kind of a walkway walking through one of their gardens, very tightly manicured garden, but it could be a walkway through anywhere. It could be, you know, it could be a pier. I've seen it being used over water. I'm going to have it kind of going through a forested area though, and I'll need to use different layering techniques here. So, well, not techniques, but processes. This one will just be an overlap right over the top of this, and you can use any kind of tree trunks. I would really recommend more of a tonal out, type of design than an outlined one. If you do an outlined one, then stamp that first, mask it off, and then stamp this. But these trees are going to represent something a little bit closer to us and to the side and front of the left-hand side of this. So I don't need to ink up this whole, this is the mossy tree trunks here. I don't need to ink up that whole thing, but I'm really not quite sure how much I'm going to use, but I think I'm going to have it kind of out here. Well, let me see. I might have it behind that. Maybe I didn't stamp this one over far enough, so I would only have that one trunk in there. So, okay, let's do this right here. The masking for Stampscapes designs is really easy. You just kind of, for the most part, there's a couple designs that you have to do a little bit more careful masking, or not careful, but involved masking, cutting off a shape, but for the most part I just use just a ripped paper towel, and that really does the trick. But we'll go about right here. Have some of the image showing, though, if some of that tree goes into that, and not really big, big deal, but trying to get this mask to cooperate here. Alright, let me see. Let me get that to lay down like right about like so. And I'll put this tree right about here. When I used to give demonstrations on masking, everyone would go, oh my gosh, if they're used to, stamping on Post-it notes, cutting it out or something like that, and doing, much more careful masking, such as they do around outline types of designs. But again, these ones are tonal, and really things are a little bit more conducive, or a lot more conducive, to overlapping sibling designs. Okay, now see, that went into that board a little bit, but no big deal. I'm talking about right there. That's where my mask was. So anyways, it got a little bit closer than I expected, but not a problem. It's because I'm going to blend in all kinds of other things in here anyway. Alright, now this is the smaller version of this Mossy Trunks design. And this one here, well, I always say ink up more than you think you'll need. And that way you can kind of, as you're composing, thinking about where you're going to put it, if you didn't stamp out or color in a portion of it, you'll have to adjust. But if you just color in the whole thing or most of it, then you won't need to worry about it. Okay, let's put this one right about like here. Okay, so I'm probably, I don't know, I'm guessing I'm stamping at about 55% of the design, not any of the top half, and missing a lot of the right-hand side of it. Okay, let's go something like that. Okay, and now we need some background trees out there. I can do all kinds of different things. I can just do like some pine trees or something like that, maybe shorter ones or something of that sort. This one right here I might have to do some masking, but maybe I'll just go for some additional trees, smaller portions of this. Looks like I can use these two right here. Okay, so one of the things about nature stamping, scenic stamping, is that when we're talking about components like this, and if the designs have been designed well, then you can dissect them and use portions for what you want. You don't have to use the whole thing, okay? Because in nature, you do see pattern. They say no two things are alike, but there are certainly things that are similar. So, say for example, I'm just taking these two trees right here, Okay. And yeah, we'll have kind of a repetition of, you know, very similar forms, but will it look awkward? Yeah, I don't think so. Or it shouldn't. Because I think we would see that type of thing in nature anyway. Okay, so masking off this area down here. And I'll just go for a couple of these trees. Let's see. I might have to mask off this one as well. Let's go like this, okay? Alright, so we get some more trees back there. Everything was looking very kind of hard, angled right now, so we'll soften up all of that later on with some additional forms. Softening forms, I'm thinking leaves and things like that. Alright, now I could add some additional things back here, but I don't know if I want to do that. Perhaps, I'm not sure. One of the things that I was going to do, I really love these kind of dead pines, and let's go for some of that right now. This is called the Leafless pine. And, I don't know, I guess they are dead, but I don't know, having something like that, kind of a dead bony element, it adds texture into the scene, but I don't know, it kind of completes a look of something, you know, because you do see kind of just a variation of, you know, new and old out in nature. You do see dead trees next to saplings, you know, and it, like I said, it just kind of completes the kind of the overall look of I guess the system, the ecosystem, or whatever you know what you're depicting. Okay, so masking off the walkway here and masking off this tree, because this tree is going to be closer to us because it goes lower than this. Usually higher up in the composition represents things that are more distant, like this, you know, this pathway curves, you know, from low to high. So it represents something, the highest point represents the farthest distance. Okay, so we have that in there. And we're kind of, you know, creating more of a pathway through here by doing that. We could use this tree again, but I'll just use my smaller one here. This is one of those scenes that I did a little bit of composition, you know, kind of, you know, considerations before starting this video. I don't have it all planned out. I have no idea what it's going to look like. But usually I'm kind of just completely winging it in these videos, and I wanted to get certain things kind of established so there wouldn't be so much kind of disruption in the process. Okay, masking off these two mossy tree trunks here, and I'm just going to get this leafless pine right in the middle. And like I said, you know, I mean, if this represents a background tree, but if some of it goes in front of these trees, you know, it's not going to be a big deal, because we're going to be adding in other things anyway, so don't even worry about it if you do get some of that. Let's try to go for a second impression with this pine. Okay, let's go right in the middle here, and hopefully it kind of looks like it's farther off in the distance because, you know, just for the fact that it is lighter than the imagery in the foreground. Usually things that are in the background are higher up in the composition, and they also can be lighter in value. Okay, something like that. It's lighter. Should we do another one? Let's hit one back here. I didn't really mean for the forest to look like it was so dead, you know, with the usage of this, but it's just going to be kind of convenient for texture. I don't know how much of it will be showing in the end result, but we'll see. Okay, so there's another one way back there, like that. It'll be subdued, though. And I'll have other things here in the foreground here, and kind of coming in from the top and whatnot. Alright, but that is kind of the foundation of this composition. Or it is. Not kind of, but... coloring, you know, I'm just doing this all in black right now, but it could be, you know, any number of colors that you choose to do. Maybe I'll just go for something like a foggy day, and we'll kind of go with that, you know, we'll go with the mossy covered idea and make those trees nice and covered in moss and whatnot. Okay, so there's another dead tree back there. I think it's dead more than dormant. Okay. Alright, right after this video, I'm going to rinse off all my tack and peel off my blocks here. They're getting very, very dusty and kind of aren't adhering very well. You just rinse this off with water. Yeah, it's just really dusty. It's barely sticky at all. But you rinse it off with just some tap water in the sink and let it air dry, and I'll tell you that material gets like brand new again in terms of the tackiness. It can get a little stained, but it doesn't even affect it at all. Okay, so kind of foggy day, green mossy trees, background, I don't know, maybe blue-grayish or something like that. Okay. For my gray, I really like this London fog that I have. I don't know a ton of different lines of inks or anything like that, you know. So I'm just kind of using what I have, but it works really good. And it's also really slippery. You know, the Memento inks are kind of real, I don't know, the viscosity of them is really very thick, and the inks are very slippery too, so these are really good foundation colors for, you know, getting a light color down and kind of establishing a lighting scheme for your scenes. Alright, now this is a glossy cardstock. Okay, now some of my black is a little bit wet, so it's smearing a touch, but again, for something like that, I'm really not worried about it, because I am going to use quite a few colors in here, and overlapping a lot. Okay, so you're kind of under this, you know, tree and the tree canopy and this thickly forested area, but I think in the background I'm going to leave that fairly light, although I did add more tone just now than I probably should have with that in mind. But oh well. Okay, go down here. This is gray, and I'm going to make this walkway, you know, kind of earthy and brown and whatnot. But it doesn't mean that I can't use some of my gray in there. If I do everything, you know, completely different color schemes that represent different colors, you know, like. I don't know. I won't use certain colors over certain things, but getting getting a kind of a foundation coat, you know, with a similar, you know, common tone really helps to kind of incorporate everything in together. Then, say, doing the trees one color, you know, the walkway a different color scheme, and you know, having nothing in common, no common, you know, no foundation colors in common, it can look a little bit fragmented and everything's unrelated. Because remember, in scenes, I mean, you know, even let's say there's a sunset over the water or something like that, you know, if you have it over the water, typically water's reflects the light that's happening, you know, in the sky or the surrounding areas, and so sunset, you know, tones would thus be in the water. Well, even if something isn't quite as reflective as that, in something like this, you'd get reflected light over, you know, all the different various objects, and it would affect things. That being said, when it comes to coloring a scene or something, it makes it a lot easier too, because you can use common colors over everything. You know, you don't have to mask things off and, you know, make sure that one color doesn't kind of pollute the other one, you know, and one object coloring doesn't, you know, mix in with something else. So it all makes it very, very easy to do this type of coloring, at least. Okay, here's some blue. This is blue summer sky. It's not going to look like summer sky because I'm already laying it over gray, and plus there's a little bit of gray in my tip here because I didn't switch tips, you know, and I did the switch. This composition here, you know, instead of this, you know, this walkway, this planked walkway, could be a, you can use the path or anything like that, a road, or you can just have it blank going through there and have, you know, rocks and grass or something like that. So this composition is good for anything. We're just kind of focusing around more of a specific object in the curvy walkway. Okay, so we have our grays down here. It's kind of a cool gray color scheme. Of course, let's try the Memento bamboo leaves. Or do I want to go with that one yet? I do have this other gray. Let's use this one first before I move into that, because once I use the green on here, if I want to switch, I'll switch tips though. But let's just go with this one right now. It's the Marvy gray. It's a little bit of a darker gray. Maybe I'll add it on the perimeter, a little bit around the top. So it's kind of capping things off a little bit more. Really get down here in the shadows. I have a feeling this area around here will kind of take on a very deep, saturated look. I'm going to have to go all the way to black, though, for this to really start coming together, because I've stamped out my images in black, so that will be the kind of more the unifying color that will have to be introduced. Okay, I always like those photographs that I've seen from places like, you know, like rainforests and whatnot, and all that green that's, you know, kind of throughout the area. This is Memento bamboo leaves. Just another dye-based ink color. Okay, adding it down. You can add some in the background as well. You know, if we're talking about kind of a, you know, a real kind of wet rainforested area where it's covered in, you know, the area is covered in moss. I'm just kind of using this Colorbox Stylus Tool on its edge, so, you know, as you can get into kind of a much more targeted area than if you just use it flat. If you don't have one of these tools, you can use a cosmetic sponge or any type of whatever ink applicator that you use do that. It's, you know, this touch that I'm doing is not specific to this tool here. Okay, so we have some trees here, like so. Alright. Let me do a few streaks of this onto this wooden walkway. It's going to be more earthy tone, but getting some of this in there will give it kind of a wet, rainforested look here, with that little tinge of moss or algae that's kind of growing on the wood. Okay, see that right there? Alright, it's kind of getting there, slowly but surely. Let's try some... Here, I have another Memento green. Let's try that one. This one's Cottage Ivy. Kind of moves up into the midtones. I have a feeling that when I lay it down right now, though, it'll be a little bit lighter. I find that when I'm using the Mementos, in this manner here, they seem to go on a little bit lighter than what I think they might, which is fine, because I like kind of moving through things at a nice gradual, you know, progression. When I do that, you know, it just, you know, you have more control over the application too. Okay. Alright, I need to use these trees more often. I love the textures on them and the little knots. Kind of when I learned to draw those on here, it was like, oh, just wanted to add a ton of that texture. Okay, one of the things that I'm doing now with this kind of darker ink is I'm kind of putting that color on mostly on one side of the trunk, just so that I get a little bit more center lighting effects. Okay, so the trees on the left side of the scene, I'm putting, you know, heavier applications of this darker green on the left side of the trunk. Okay, so that, and not over on the right side, I'm putting the ink on the right side of those trunks, so that the left side, or the whatever side the trees are on, we're getting kind of more center lighting here in the middle. All right. It's looking way too greenish right now, but that's where the brown will come into play. And I have a feeling that I'll want a little bit more green after I apply the brown, so I'm just going to apply it right now. Okay. Like that. Okay, so speaking of that brown, maybe it's time. Okay, let me see here. Okay, let's switch tips here. That looks like it has some burgundy on it or something like that, but it is clean, I think. Yeah, actually, there is a little bit there. I washed these at the last convention, but I don't know, I kind of took like a minute or two just to do like a bunch of them, and I didn't really do them very well. I normally don't do them very well. I just kind of usually, a lot of times that tip will be used for magenta or something like that, my pink tones, and then I'll have another one dedicated to another color, but eventually all my tips kind of turn to black anyway, so that's when I usually do my cleaning. Desert sand, by the way. It's kind of a tan, right? It'll warm up my color scheme a little bit. It's very subtle, but I will move into the darker tones here shortly. Okay, so even in my cool blue-gray background, adding this tone right over the top of it, or it could have been underneath too, kind of changes the spirit of it in terms of the the temperature scheme. Starting to warm it up a touch. It's very, very light in value. Sometimes when I start using it, I'm kind of wondering, is that dry or is it, you know, just a very light color? Sometimes I forget myself. Okay, how about a walnut stain? That's a very warm tone. You have all the different variations of warm colors coming from the Distress line of inks. You know, tea dye, antique linen, walnut stain. Walnut stain's one of my favorites. I think if I was to get these other colors, again, antique linen or something like that, well, I mean, I already have the pad, so, but I think the re-inker for it would be really beneficial. Because I never stamp something in those colors anyways, so I don't really need the pad, but the ink would be good, the color of ink. Okay, so just adding this down like so. Kind of oscillate it. Leave some areas light and dark on your walkway, okay? You know, so it looks like light is hitting it, as opposed to seeing this as one shape to be filled in uniformly. Okay, so let's add some of this down to this green as well, and make this green less, I don't know, kind of greenish, and make it a little bit more olive and earthy looking. Okay. Okay, a lot more down here, kind of in the shadows. You figured the walkway would be darker, kind of, you know, coming into the shadows here, coming into the tree line, under the canopy, whatever. Okay. Let's try a brown. It's Marvy brown. I have a Memento rich cocoa. That should do the trick as well. Okay, Marvy, let's check that out. I know my Marvy one it's a big influencer whenever I use it. It's not always very prominent, but it plays a big role in things like sunsets or grass whenever I use it. It just kind of mellows everything out a little bit, you know, in terms of the usage of bright colors. It makes them a little bit more earthy, kind of looking, but still retaining the rich intensity of the colors. Alright, and you can see it's really warm. It's very warm toned brown. See that right down here? Kind of always turn your card at an angle. It's very conducive to your application movement. Okay. I say that, as you notice, I'm kind of rotating my card around in different angles. Okay, let's hit this walkway up a little bit more. This is using rich cocoa, Memento. And that should about do it there. You can see so there's some shadows on our walkway, so kind of breaking up the monotony of the this planking a little bit. You know, having it oscillate between light and dark a little bit more. Painting some of the trunks here. Touch. Alright, let's move into a Marvy dark brown. Marvy inks are a little bit more, or quite a bit more, maybe, thinner. Quite a bit thinner than most other inks. Their viscosity is such that they allow for it allows for the penetration of this ink through the thicker inks to happen at a much faster rate. Because of the thinner aspect of it, it just soaks into the paper faster. Okay, see this just kind of going down the edge of my trees. While not coloring in the whole thing, so again, these trees on this side are darker than the left side, and over here I'll do the same thing. I'll put, you know, these trees, these three trunks, I'll make them darker on the left-hand side of them. And again with the dark brown here, maybe I'll go all the way to black too, but kind of working it through the lighter tones, lighter values. So that's one of those little things too. I mean, see, we're just doing selective coloring here instead of just coloring something up. You just do more of a selective coloring, and in a case like this, I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes sense that I forgot what I was going to say. Just certain areas are going to be darker than others, okay? Oh, center lighting, okay. So on this one right here, I'm just going to have light coming from here. So that just means when you look at objects, you know, think about that and color accordingly. It's really, you don't have to have, you know, 15 different lighting schemes that you do, you know, to be really effective. I probably use maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 different lighting schemes, and one of them I probably use, I don't know, 90% of the time, and that's just center lighting. You know, I always kind of say that kind of a good kind of approach to use in scenic stamping is just to see yourself as a lighting director, you know, rather than kind of analyzing where light would be in a certain scene. You know, if you saw it out in nature or something like that, if you were out in that location that you're depicting, I see stamping as more of, you know, just putting light wherever you want it to go. So in this one right here, it'll be center lighting, so, you know, just I'm kind of adjusting everything around that. It'll be lighter in this area right here and just darker around the perimeter, okay? Okay. I wonder if I can use, speaking of thinner inks, let's try this pine green. I haven't used my pine green in a while. kind of working those shadows a little bit more. Okay. Is it time for black? I think it might be. Let's go to black. I really love adding this black into these scenes. Now see, I have a lot of the green in there still, so it's not registering as black right now. So it's just kind of like a, you know, greenish, kind of a really dark olive color. But when you start using, when you get to the same value or color, usually both, that you stamped out your objects in, that same color in the toning shading process is going to be the one that really kind of starts to unite everything and bring it all together. So kind of don't be, you know, let things happen. Don't be too impatient and try to hurry to get to it. You know, let your other colors develop, because having those undercuts too of all these different colors in here are not lost. It's the more shades that you kind of layer into your pieces, just in general, the kind of the richer the overall piece is going to seem. You see all those different tones in here. It's kind of glowing. That's, you know, with the use of all those undershades. Okay, so even though I've covered up, you know, like almost all of that London fog gray with other colors, that gray is affecting the overall piece, you know, in terms of what you see, because anything you lay over the top of it is going to be transparent layers. So okay, going on like this. At this point in time, we don't want to get a bunch of oval shapes everywhere, or, you know, the edges of your thing showing, so just nice light touch. I showed this in a recent video, those makeup applicators. These are really fantastic for laying down kind of some real soft applications of whatever hue you're using. It's really fantastic for my kind of edges and creating kind of a nice vignette. It kind of frames things off really nicely. Just kind of going with this softer applicator, like so. See, kind of that darker edge is kind of doing it. It's framing things off a little bit more, isn't it? Four corners especially, to really frame things off. Kind of makes the light in the, you know, the center scene, or wherever you have your light remaining, wherever you've retained it, it makes that area seem much lighter by contrast. Alright, something like that. Thinking about some different textures. My little tiny rock's small. It should be good right down here in this foreground area. It's looking a little bit bare to me. I'm going to bring it in some additional foliage in there anyways, but a little bit of extra texture should do. Suit that area nicely. Let's go with the dark brown on that one. Really barely shows up if it does at all. See right there? You can see it because it's kind of dry, but I mean wet. You know, the dark brown is wet. Alright, we're going to have to go darker for it to show up. Let's go with the black. Let's put some back in the background as well. Okay. Let's go with a blotted version of it. Just get some texture going on back there. Okay. Very subtle in many areas. See it in between those trees, down at the base, right around back here, but here it is in these areas. Okay. Okay, let's add some special effects in here. Okay, Colorbox Stylus Tool. Let's add a little bit of mist and kind of atmosphere in here. Let's go with the Q-tip. I've used these before. Okay, this one seems nice and soft. Okay, so a nice soft application of something requires a soft applicator. Let's use our Colorbox. Colorbox. Frost White pigment ink. Okay, let's not add it in blobs. You want to really dab off a lot of it and apply it very lightly. Okay, distant things, maybe they're becoming kind of a little bit more obscured in terms of the visuals, the edges of things. Putting a little bit of fog around things. A little bit of light coming through in between trees, kind of obscuring some of the forms with a little bit of a tone. Same thing right here. This background tree. Let's put some low-line fog at the base of it, like so. Same thing with this one. Okay, so like that. Alright. Now we have this wooden walkway here, and one of the things that I just remembered to do was to explore some different shading or coloring methods. Certainly with things like alcohol markers out there these days, there's so many different values of any given hue. Okay, so browns, right? And this is a really nice thing to be able to add in here to, go in more specific areas. Like, say I'm starting from the outside and kind of working into my light here, but just getting some extra, texture and color into given areas, using, the different values that we have. These are La Plumes, by the way, but any alcohol markers should do, or dye-based markers, you can do that too. I would start off very light and, kind of work incrementally darker. But you can certainly go in if you're really comfortable with using them. I probably am not, so what I do is I just start light and I just kind of start working darker, and then I kind of blend in, ones that I've kind of laid down, and you can certainly blend them together. Okay. You can even bring these up into the trees, of course, Pale green. This one's from Shuttle art. Let's bring a little bit of brightness into some areas, Add a little bit of that moss to the trunks here and there. I don't know, just hit it with a little bit more of that green, doesn't it? Underneath or over the top of all that dye-based ink, it's kind of creating a little bit of a glow. Actually, I think it really needed that. Kind of bringing that moss to life a little bit. See that? That super bright, green, like that. It's kind of bringing, I don't know, just a different element to those, to the overall composition, really. There's a yellow green. I bought these pens for, I don't know, these are like 50 cents each or something. And a pack of 80. And it's by, again, Shuttle art. But there's, I don't know, there's numerous brands. They're probably all coming out of the same factory, I'm guessing. Somewhere. Probably overseas, I'm sure. Okay, let's bring a little of this into this planking here, Some of the same kind of moss. Or algae is on the boards. Okay, I think that should do it with the pens. I tried this before, and I don't know, it worked okay, but, there's colored pencil. I don't think I need it here, but I was just kind of surprised that the colored pencil does surprisingly stick a little bit to glossy cardstock. It's not the recommended paper at all, It's like the opposite of the type of paper you'd really want to be using on there, for an ideal application. But, for a little bit of texture, it's kind of cool. Okay, let's go and add a little bit more. I think I'm going to do that thing where I have these little glowing spheres in here. What they represent, I don't know. Little fairies or something like that. But I think it would be kind of interesting. Now, I have all my foreground put in here too still, so I'm not going to forget that. Let's do something else. Now, sometimes when I use the Shuttle art pens, when I try to do this effect, when I go over it with the pigmenting, the Shuttle art just kind of like goes back into solution and comes right off of there, but oh, let's give it a try. Okay, these are Shuttle art gel pens now, and they're thinner than the Uniball Signo pens, okay? But let me just try some of these here. So these are, yeah, they're real kind of watery. Let me go with the lighter version on this too. I'll do both maybe. I guess I could spray fix this as well. Man, I don't know if I want to do that, but because I still have these other things to do. But I'm gonna put these little glowing little spheres, and they're going to represent kind of fireflies in the scene. Once I kind of have them glowing. I've always lived on the West Coast, so I've never seen fireflies in person, when I've been traveling or anything like that either, so. But I want to watch videos of them. I love kind of, what do you call it, bioluminescence in like sea creatures and different living things. I think it's really cool. There's actually a series of stamps, postage stamps out right now, if they're still out there. Bought some last year about bioluminescence. Okay, so I have all these little kind of glowing, well, I don't know, they're not glowing right now, but these little dots in here. Can add some in the background as well. Okay, but let's allow those to dry. It shouldn't take long to dry, but like I said, these ones are they're waterier, so they do take a little bit more time to dry. I found than the Shuttle art ones. I mean, Uniball Signo ones, sorry. Okay, let's add my foreground. Couldn't wait to use this foreground here, these leaves. I think I'll layer it, I'll stamp this down, then I'll put some more of that green in front of it, so there's some of these little green glowing spheres kind of in the back of it and in front. I might need to spray seal, workable fixatives to seal those little green dots down. I don't know. I'll try it out. I think that might be called for here. Okay, so Versafine black. I'm going to go for something really, really black here in terms of my impressions. Okay. It'll be definitely my foreground in here, having these leaves like this. It'll kind of fill out the composition a little bit more too, or should. Okay. See that right there. Re-ink. And maybe come in with another piece. Well, like so. Come into it from this side over here. Something like that. Kind of frames things off a lot more, doesn't it? I think it gives it more dimension and really expands on that kind of the field of view or whatnot, if you were talking like camera terms. And just overall framing if you have things kind of in the foreground like that. Do I want this overhanging one? Yeah, why not? Add a couple like this, maybe. Alright, actually that looks pretty good. I didn't know if I was overdoing it with the overhang, but yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I think it frames things off even better, having those up there. Okay, so we have that. Yeah, that really kind of creates this passageway through there, doesn't it? Okay. Alright, now I'm going to have to wait for this to dry, I think, or set up a little bit. Yeah. One thing about these pens, and they work beautifully, okay? They don't clog up on me, and they apply just fine, but they are really watery, and they'll just kind of come right off of this surface here. Alright, I kind of got some paint up there. Or the pigment ink. I'm going over it too early, but there we go. I don't know. I've never had these clog on me so far, these Shuttle art ones. I don't know, they're just super inexpensive ones, too. They're not, like, super high quality. But, from a clogging aspect, they did not clog. I don't know, I haven't ran into one that has. Okay, so... any more of these little glowing sphere-y types of things down. I guess it stands to reason there could be, you know, some that are glowing more than others. There are ones that are closer to us or whatnot. Something like that. I'll spray a workable fixative on this, though. And then go over them. The reason what I'm doing is I'm going to make these glow with a little bit of pigment ink, you know, kind of spears over the top of them. But if I do that, if I tap on those things with a, you know, piece of cotton swab like that, it'll kind of wipe these right off of there, right off the surface. instead of, you know, what I want, which is for it to be retained on there. You know, a little green little dot, just with a kind of a glow around it. Okay. But I really have to wait for that Versafine pigment ink to dry. Okay, getting there. And, I don't know, I'll look at it with some fresh eyes in a little bit and see if there's anything else that I want to add to it. Okay, I have just sprayed this with a Krylon UV spray. It's not the ideal. I wanted to hit it with a workable fixative, but yeah, the tip of my workable fixative spray is clogged, and I need to unclog that or just get a new, you know, those new spray tips, and that should be maybe a better solution for this, but I will just go with that. I just hit it with a thin spray, and my Versafine pigment ink is not quite dry yet. This has been about, I don't know, I gave it about half an hour, but I just kind of touched that, you know, those branches right now, and I can tell they're still a little bit moist. But I want to work on this scene, so I'm going to so I'll just be a little bit more careful about my application of this pigment ink. Okay, let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit. And let's see, I want this soft, but not too soft, a tip right here. There's a little bit of a frayed part right there. I'll work that back into it, kind of smash that back into place. Okay. Just applying it down around some of these little green-ish little spheres. Or, well, not spheres, I'm kind of giving it a sphere look right now, but these little dots. I probably didn't spray it enough, so I can tell they're kind of coming off a little bit, but I still get that little tiny little bit of a glow, so not too bad. I can add more over the top of it too, which is probably what I'll do in terms of the that little greenish color. Okay, I'm being careful around the those leaves, those wet leaves there. I'm just trying to be careful not to tap too hard because that black is coming off. Okay. Looks like so. Now these little pigment ink, little glowing spheres, will not be quite as prominent when this ink dries, so they'll be a little bit more integrated, I think, and lighter, which should serve it, you know, the scene well, just having them a little bit more subdued. Okay, now let's see. This was that yellow. Let me go back to my green. There's so many green hues. Let me just give you an example of having kind of a multi-pack. There's 180, but look at this range of greens here. Just in, I mean, those are pretty close in value and hue. You know, I mean, but it's clearly a nice range, but it's one of the nice things about having you know, one of these multi-packs, and they're so inexpensive too. You know, the price per pen is. Okay, now some of these are a little bit more white than I want them to be. And it's because I think, you know, some of the color came off when I tapped it down. It just kind of goes back into solution. So I'll just go back in to these center areas and add a little bit more of that straight kind of lime green tinge to the those dots. Or those, I don't know, whatever, spheres. Oops, let me see, here we go. So just to reestablishing that hue in here. And it's kind of related, you know, that green, you have that green in the moss, and there's some green on the planks. Okay, so here's our little glowing little bits in there to kind of bring some life to the scene. Let's go in and bring some lighting into the scene now. Okay, now things are a little bit more, you know, kind of diffused and subtle in this piece, but I don't know if we'd have like really bright highlights or something like that, but I still like to bring in some additional texture. So in areas that are, you know, somewhat close to the white of the paper, I'll bring in some of this pigment ink and just kind of reiterate that lighting in there. Kind of bring these little dots into it. And just make these planks a little bit more dimensional. Maybe on the top sides of them, kind of going into the light, maybe I'll give them a little bit of a edge. So, kind of in the shadows, we kind of can add a little bit of a darker line. And for highlights, we'll just add a little bit of a lighter line. Okay? And this is also, you know, one of the reasons why I leave some areas light in the coloring, toning process, and so you can, it gives us an opportunity to add these little effects down into the scene. If you don't leave some white of the paper, it's saying that no kind of white light is, you know, within that space, within your scene, so doing white highlights just kind of stand out a little bit too much, unless you're doing something like special effects, like you're doing like Christmas lights on a tree or something like that. Then, you know, with those artificial lights, you can have any type of thing you want in there, any colors, and it makes sense from a visual standpoint. Alright, so anyways, see that going in there, it's just a little bit more textured. Okay, now we have this area in the distance back in here, and now it's light in that area, so maybe I'll bring in a little bit more lighting to it. And there's some light coming from the center here. We've darkened in the edge of our tree, you know, and left this side of it lighter. Well, we can bring a little bit more light, maybe, in a very subtle way. I mean, you can do 2 dots if you want to, or something like that, and it look pretty cool. I'll add a little bit more just to kind of reiterate the lighting. So on the opposite side of the tree from the shadow, I'll put a highlight. Okay, so on the right hand side of the trees on the left side, there's a little bit of highlight. On the trees to the right of the lighting, I'll put highlights on the left side of them. Okay, let's take a look and see what this looks like. Well, do a tiny pinpoint of light in the middle of some of these spheres just to make them a little bit lighter, brighter. So it's like a tiny little white center surrounded by the green. Kind of makes them twinkle a little bit more. See the difference between these ones and these ones. So I'm just putting like a little tiny dot amidst that glow. Okay, I think that should do it. Let me try a little bit more, just a touch more tone on the, sorry. I've never done this with the Versafine. Let's try it here with this brush here. Let's take a little bit of Versafine on my makeup applicator. Okay. Let's go around the perimeter just a touch more with that. Just to kind of frame things off even more with a darker black. Okay, 4 corners. Yeah, I'll put up a little bit around the edge too, why not? Okay, see that? This brush works really good for this purpose. It's really adding it's really applying a very controlled amount of it down in a very soft manner. I like what I'm seeing, so I'm kind of just adding a little bit more and more here. Everything is getting darker. Alright, I think that should do it. I think that made for a nice, rich, kind of color scheme, color palette. You don't have a lot of, like, real bright, super standout hues, like, you know, on my last scene, like this, you know, super blue one or something like that, but I think it's rich and deep with saturated hues. A lot more earthy and subtle in nature, but I like what's happening around in here. You know, these little things kind of bring some areas to life, and I like the textures that have been achieved with the use of the pigment ink applications. Let me bring this a little bit closer. Let me see. You can see the differences, you know, in these areas right in here when I show it a little bit more close up, like that. It's a little bit more apparent, but yeah, fun scene to do. And I really like doing wood, you know, especially with the all the media out there that we have to utilize these days in the form of alcohol pens and different colors of inks. The distress inks work really good, you know, for kind of distressed wood, you know, and you can mix and match and blend them all together if you have them. Even like colored pencils I really didn't use too much of on here, but you can certainly go in here and utilize that type of thing. Even though if it's on glossy cardstock, if you're going to apply more ink, I would do the pencils last. You know, if you're using wax, you know, it'll resist any ink that you want to put over the top of it, but if you know what media you're going to be using, you can plan accordingly. So anyways, little living forest scene. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or want to see some more videos, go ahead and subscribe to the channel or check out Stampscapes.com for a lot more still images and samples embedded in the stamp modules as well as in the lesson section.